I don't need anything but you. The mountain man spoke to the obese girl. He only wants her. Snow lay thick on the streets of Pinewood, Montana, muffling wagon wheels and church bells, brightening even the tired false fronts of the wooden buildings. It was the week before Christmas, and the whole town seemed to have somewhere to be, stringing garlands, buying sugar and flour, arguing over hams and cranberries for Sunday dinner. Inside Whitmore's general store, the air was warm and crowded, smelling of coffee beans, lamp oil, and wet wool. Lanterns swung from the beams, casting a golden light over barrels of potatoes, bolts of calico, and rows of shiny tin toys laid out for the children of those who could afford such things. In the farthest corner, keeping her back pressed to the shelves as if she could disappear into them, stood Cecilia Cece Ashford. She was 30 years old, 5'3", and heavy in the way people in Pinewood never let her forget. Her belly soft and round beneath a worn gray dress, her arms full and plump under a thin coat that wasn't nearly warm enough, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold and from a lifetime of embarrassment. Snowmelt dampened the ends of her honey-brown hair, which clung in loose waves to her temples. In her basket lay exactly 3 things: a small sack of flour, a tin of salt, and a bar of cheap yellow soap. Cece held 2 crumpled dollar bills in her gloved hand, her lips moving silently as she added prices in her head. Rent for the room above the livery had gone up. Coal cost more. Work had been scarce this week. There were only so many shirts and tablecloths that needed scrubbing in a town this size. Her jaw tightened. She set the bar of soap back on the shelf. She could live without soap that smelled of lavender. She could not live without bread. She had just turned away when a sharp, bright voice sliced through the noise of the store. Well, would you look at that? The fat laundress is shopping for Christmas. Cece went still. Slowly, she turned her head. Martha Wellington stood in the center aisle like she owned the place, wrapped in a fur-trimmed coat far too fine for a mining town, her blonde hair piled perfectly beneath a feathered hat. Beside her hovered 2 other young women, Emily Brooks and Sarah Collins, all lace cuffs and narrowed eyes. Martha's lips curled. "Tell me, Cece Ashford, do you actually have enough money to buy what's in that basket? Or are you just here to smell the food?" A few men by the stove snickered. Someone at the counter glanced over, then quickly looked away. Cece lowered her gaze, tightening her fingers around the basket handle. "I'm just here to pay, Miss Wellington. I don't want any trouble." Sarah's laugh was high and cruel. "No trouble, dear. We're just curious. I mean, look at you." She waved a gloved hand up and down as if presenting Cece to an invisible crowd. Big as a barn and still too poor to buy decent meat. Emily leaned in, her perfume cloying. "Maybe she eats the laundry soap," she murmured, loud enough for half the store to hear. That would explain it. Laughter rippled through the aisles. Heat burned up Cece's neck. She focused on the rough boards beneath her boots, on the flour and salt in her basket, on the memory of her mother's voice telling her to keep her head down and her temper quiet. If she could just get to the counter, pay, and get out. Martha stepped directly into her path. "Tell me, Cece," she said sweetly, "are you going to the Christmas social at the church?" Her eyes glittered. "No, of course you're not. No one wants a greedy little piglet at the refreshment table. You'd eat everything in sight." Her hand shot out, faster than Cece could react. The basket was wrenched from Cece's fingers and turned upside down. Flour spilled in a pale cloud across the floor. The salt tin clattered, split, and its contents scattered like snow. "No, please." Cece dropped to her knees, frantically trying to scoop the flour back into the torn sack with shaking hands. "That's all I have. Please, Martha, don't—" Martha ground her boot heel into the spilled flour. "Look at her," she said, laughing. "Begging for crumbs? You don't belong in this town, Cecilia. You don't belong anywhere." Someone chuckled. Someone else muttered, "Shameful." But no one moved. Hot tears blurred Cece's vision. Her fingers went numb from the cold seeping up through the floorboards. In that moment, she felt every cruel word, every sideways glance, every snicker behind her back pressing down like a hand on the back of her neck, forcing her lower and lower. A hand that did not belong to Martha closed around the banker's daughter's wrist. The grip was large, calloused, and utterly unyielding. "Let go of the basket," a low, rough voice said. "Now." The store fell silent. People turned toward the sound, and Cece, still on her knees, looked up through a blur of tears. Wyatt, Bear Blackwood, stood over them, tall enough to brush the doorframe, broad enough to block the light, his dark coat dusted with snow, his gray eyes hard as winter steel. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Martha. He was looking only at her. If you were listening to this like a story on the radio or on YouTube right now, where in the world would you be hearing it from? For a heartbeat, no one in Whitmore's general store moved. Martha stared at the big hand clamped around her wrist. Her face went pale beneath the rouge. Mr. Blackwood," she stammered, "I didn't see you come in." Wyatt, Bear Blackwood, didn't loosen his grip. Up close, he was even more imposing than the stories said, nearly 6'6", shoulders like stacked timber, a chest broad enough to carry half a fallen tree. His coat was thick wool, dark as wet spruce. His long hair shot through with silver at the temples. A neatly trimmed beard framed a mouth set in a hard, uncompromising line. His eyes, though, storm gray and sharp, were locked not on Martha, but on the woman kneeling in the flour. "Let go of the basket," he said again, softer this time, but no less dangerous. Martha's fingers slackened instantly. The empty basket thudded to the floor. Wyatt released her wrist as if it offended him to touch her. Then he knelt. The largest, most feared man in 3 counties lowered himself onto one knee beside Cecilia Ashford. Up close, Cece could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the sun and wind etched into his skin, the scar tracing from his left brow into his hairline. He smelled of cold air, pine smoke, and horses, clean, honest scents that didn't belong to parlors or bank offices. "Miss Ashford," he said quietly, "stand up." She tried. Her leg shook, and she wobbled. His hand closed around hers, calloused but gentle, lifting her as if she weighed nothing more than a sack of feathers instead of flour. Her cheeks burned. "I thank you, Mr. Blackwood, but you don't have to." "I know what I have to do," he murmured. He didn't let go of her hand. The whole town knew Wyatt Blackwood's story. 17 years ago, bandits had come for his money and taken his family instead. His wife and 5 children, gone in a single night of gunfire and flames. Since then, he had lived up in the timberline, running trap lines, cutting lumber, trading horses and pelts. He came down from the mountains only when he had to, and when he did, people stepped out of his way. No one step now. Wyatt turned, still holding Cece's shaking fingers in his. "What did you do to her?" he asked Martha, his voice no louder than before, but something in it made even the stove fire seem to quiet. Martha tossed her curls and tried to smile. "It was only a bit of fun, Mr. Blackwood. Cecilia knows that. Don't you, Cecilia?" Her gaze flicked like a blade toward Cece. "We were just teasing." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Teasing is when children call each other names and forget by supper. This wasn't teasing." He turned his head slightly, taking in the spilt flour, the shattered tin of salt, the cheap soap still on the shelf beyond Cece's reach. "This was humiliation," he said. "Deliberate, calculated." Sarah bristled. "Now see here." He didn't even glance her way. His gaze swept the store instead, touching each face in turn. The men by the stove, the women at the counter, the clerk halfway through weighing sugar on the scale. One by one, eyes dropped, boots shifted, throats cleared. Wyatt's hand tightened around Cece's, just enough that she felt the steadiness of him, the solid promise in his grip. "I watched you," he said to the room at large. "I watched you laugh when she begged you to stop. I watched you stand and do nothing while her last bit of food was ground into the floor." A flush of shame crept up Mr. Whitmore's neck. "Now, Blackwood, there's no need to make a scene." "The scene was made," Wyatt cut in, "when a woman who has done nothing but work herself half to death to survive was treated like she's less than you because of the shape of her body and the weight of her purse." Cece wanted to sink through the floor. She had spent years trying to be invisible. Now every eye was on her, and yet, for the first time, she didn't feel like a spectacle. She felt defended. Martha lifted her chin. "Cecilia doesn't belong in our circles. She knows that. She's the laundress." Wyatt's gaze flickered, and for the first time there was a hint of something like contempt in it, directed not at Cece, but at the girl in front of him. "She is a woman," he said softly. "That's enough to earn respect in my book." He turned fully toward Cece then, so that the whole town could see the shift in his face when he looked at her. The hard lines eased, the storm in his eyes calmed. "Cecilia Ashford," he said, his voice pitched low for her ears, even as the whole room strained to catch every word. "You listen to me now, not to them." Her throat bobbed. "Yes, sir." "You are not a joke." A tear slid down her cheek. "You are not an embarrassment," he went on. "Not a burden, not a mistake, not something to be tolerated in the corner." Another tear followed the first. "You are a decent, hard-working woman who has survived on almost nothing while half this town has feasted and gossiped," he said, "and I am done watching them grind you into the dirt." He straightened then, still not releasing her hand. "From this day forward," Wyatt said clearly, turning back to the crowd, "Cecilia Ashford is under my protection." A ripple of shock moved through the store. "What do you mean, under your protection?" Someone near the counter blurted, "You barely talk to anyone, Blackwood. You don't take in strays." Wyatt's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a threat. "I don't take in strays," he agreed. "I make choices." He looked down at Cece again, and this time there was something raw and vulnerable in his expression, something that made her breath hitch. "And this is my choice." Martha scoffed, though her voice wobbled. "You can't be serious. Her? When you could have any woman in this town? That That fat laundress? Wyatt's answer was quiet, but it cut through the air like a knife. I don't want any woman in this town, he said. I don't need anything or anyone but her. The room gasped. Cece stared up at him, stunned. Mr. Blackwood? He bent his head fractionally, just enough so she could see that he meant every word. Then he faced Mr. Whitmore. You're going to pack up everything she came here for, he said, and you're going to add to it. Flour, salt, sugar, coffee, meat, butter, cheese, eggs, enough to see her through the winter. Mr. Whitmore gulped. That'll come dear, Blackwood. I didn't ask the price. Wyatt reached into his coat and pulled out a leather wallet, thick with bills. He laid several on the counter without counting. You'll write the total, and if it's more than this, I'll settle up next time I come down. But she, he nodded toward Cece, will not leave this store hungry. No one argued. He turned back to her, his voice gentler again. You'll come with me when we're done here, Cecilia? We'll talk on the road. But for now, you let me carry this. For the first time in her life, Cecilia Ashford was not shrinking herself to fit into a corner, not apologizing for existing. For the first time, someone had stood before the whole town and declared that she was enough. The wagon creaked under the weight of supplies Whitmore hastily loaded. Flour sacks, tins of lard, dried apples, jars of preserves, thick cuts of beef wrapped in paper. Wyatt stacked each item with steady, practiced hands. Cece stood beside the wagon tongue, fingers twisting nervously in her gloves, still unable to understand what had happened. People inside the store continued whispering, but no one dared come out. Not while Wyatt Blackwood stood there. When the last crate was secured, Wyatt turned to her. Up you go. His voice was softer again, gentle even. Cece hesitated. Mr. Blackwood, Wyatt, he corrected. If you're coming with me, you call me Wyatt. Her cheeks warmed. Wyatt, I don't think I should go. You don't really know me. And what you said in there... He moved closer. Snowflakes dusted his hair and beard, turning him into something carved out of winter itself. What I said in there, he murmured, was the truth. Her breath faltered. You don't have to believe it yet, he went on, but you will. He offered his hand. For a long, trembling moment, Cece stared at it. No man had ever offered her a hand without pity, mockery, or hidden intentions. Never as something simple and steady, an invitation. She placed her palm in his. He lifted her onto the wagon seat with surprising ease, then climbed up beside her, wrapping a thick wool blanket around her before taking the reins. The horses snorted clouds of steam into the freezing air. Wyatt clicked his tongue, and the wagon rolled onto the snow-covered road, heading north, towards the mountains. Pinewood shrank behind them. Cece stared down at the blanket, fingers gripping its rough edges. Wyatt let the silence settle, the way only a man used to solitude could, patiently, without pressure. When he finally spoke, it was quiet enough to blend with the creak of the wagon wheels. I know you're wondering why I stepped in. Cece looked up. Yes. Wyatt kept his eyes on the road. I've watched you before, not in a way that should frighten you. I'm not a man who lurks in shadows. His hands tightened slightly on the reins. But when I come down from the mountains, I notice things. People. How they move through the world. And you noticed me? She whispered. I noticed you trying not to be noticed, he said. That told me more than anything else. He glanced at her then, a brief, cutting look that saw far more than she wanted him to. You walk small, he said. You keep your head down even when you've done nothing wrong. You apologize just for existing. His jaw tightened. You shrink yourself, Cecilia, not because of your size, but because of how they treat you. Her throat closed. No one had ever said this aloud. Wyatt continued, I don't like it when people go quiet out of fear or shame, especially not women. The word women carried weight with him, respect, memory, something deeper she didn't yet understand. The road grew steeper. Pines loomed on either side, their branches sagging under snow. A wind picked up, rattling the bare aspens and brushing cold fingers across Cece's cheeks. She pulled the blanket tighter. Wyatt noticed immediately. You cold? A little. Without a word, he reached behind the seat and handed her a second blanket, thick and lined with fur. When she hesitated, he draped it over her shoulders himself. His fingers brushed the back of her neck, warm and careful. A strange shiver went through her. Wyatt, she swallowed. Back at the store, you said something about me being under your protection. I meant it. But why? I'm not your responsibility. His voice went quieter. I don't offer protection lightly. Cece's heart thudded. What do you mean? He was silent for a long time. The horses' hooves crunched through new snow. The mountains rose higher, their peaks hidden by low-hanging clouds. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Lower, rougher. My wife was treated the same way you were, he said, before I married her, before anyone knew she was mine. His fingers tightened on the reins. She was soft, kind, too gentle for people who liked to tear at what they didn't understand. Cece's breath caught. The pain in his voice wasn't fresh, but it was deep, carved into him like an old scar. I protected her, he said. I loved her, but cruelty still found her even after she became my wife. Words can wound worse than knives. He paused. Bandits took her from me 17 years ago, but the town's cruelty took pieces of her long before they ever came. Snow blurred the edges of the trail. Cece felt tears prick her eyes. I failed her in ways I can't forget, Wyatt murmured. And when I saw them standing over you today, laughing, grinding your food into the floor, it was like watching her suffer again. Cece pressed a hand to her mouth. Wyatt, I can't bring my family back, he said, but I'll be damned before I let another woman crumble under the same cruelty. She looked at him then, really looked, at the quiet grief in his eyes, at the strength in his hands, at the way he kept glancing toward her, worried she might be cold or frightened or hurting. You're not doing this out of pity, she whispered. His head snapped toward her eyes, flashing. No, don't mistake what I feel. Then what do you feel? Her voice trembled. Wyatt drew the horses to a slow halt. Snow fell softly around them like drift and ash. He turned fully toward her, gray eyes steady. I feel drawn to you, he said, to your quiet courage, to your softness in a world that rewards cruelty, to the way you keep going, even when life gives you nothing but burden. Her breath stilled. And I feel, he went on, voice softening, that I don't need anything in this world but the woman sitting beside me. Cece's vision blurred again, not with shame this time, but with something warm, terrifying, and beautiful. Wyatt, she choked. We're not finished talking, he said gently, but the rest can wait until we reach the cabin. You'll be safe there. The wagon started forward again, climbing into the deeper forest. For the first time in her life, Cecilia Ashford let herself believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she was wanted. Snow was falling harder by the time they crossed the frozen creek that marked the boundary of Wyatt's land. The trees thickened, the wind quieted, and the world seemed to soften around them as the wagon climbed toward a wide clearing nestled beneath a ridge of dark pines. Then Cece saw it. A great timber cabin, bigger than any house she'd ever stepped inside, stood against the mountainside, its log walls gleaming honey-gold beneath the lanterns hung along the porch. Smoke curled from the chimney in a steady plume. The warm glow in the windows lit up the snow like amber. Her breath hitched. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Wyatt flicked the reins gently. "Built most of it myself. Took 7 years." "You built it?" Cece stared, astonished. "With my own hands. Had help for the upper beams, but the rest, I wanted a home that could survive anything." He didn't say the rest aloud, but she felt it anyway. A home that storms and bullets couldn't take from him again. Wyatt stopped the wagon beneath the porch overhang, climbed down, and lifted Cece by the waist as if that were the most natural thing in the world. Her boots touched the wooden planks lightly, and he kept his hands at her sides a moment longer than necessary. "Careful of the step," he murmured. No one had ever spoken to her that gently, not once. Inside, the cabin was warm enough to thaw bone and soul. Flames leapt in the massive stone hearth, casting light across polished wood floors, a bearskin rug, and shelves filled with books and carefully mended tools. A kettle hummed on a cast-iron stove in the adjoining kitchen. Everything was clean, sturdy, lived in, not like something built for show, but something built for life. Cece wrapped her arms around herself. "It's more than I imagined." Wyatt set the crates down near the table. "It's quiet here, peaceful, safe." His voice softened. "You'll rest well." She blinked, unsure how to answer. Wyatt took her shawl and coat, hanging them near the fire to dry. Her dress clung damply to her wrists. He noticed. "You're cold," he said. "Sit by the fire. I can help unpack. You help by warming up." There was no arguing with that tone, not harsh, but firm and protective in a way that unraveled her. She sat. The heat seeped into her skin, chasing away the sting of the winter air. Wyatt busied himself in the kitchen, moving with a confidence that surprised her. Pots clattered, a knife struck the cutting board, broth bubbled. She watched him without meaning to. He moved like a man who had lived alone long enough to know every rhythm of his home. Strong, sure, unhurried. Yet every few minutes he glanced toward her, as if to be certain she was still there, still warm, still breathing. After a while he said, "You hungry?" Her stomach answered for her. She flushed. "A little." He turned with a faint, almost hidden smile. "I can fix that." Minutes later, he set a steaming bowl of stew before her, thick chunks of venison, potatoes, carrots, and onions in a rich broth. The smell alone nearly brought tears to her eyes. She picked up the spoon, hesitated. Wyatt raised a brow. "What's wrong?" I don't want you to think I eat too much." Wyatt leaned his knuckles on the table, gaze locked on hers with quiet intensity. "I think," he said slowly, "that anyone who works as hard as you do has the right to eat until she's full. And I also think you've been hungry too long." His voice gentled. "You eat as much as you need, Cecilia. I won't judge you. Not now, not ever." Her eyes stung. She bent her head and took the first bite. It was the best thing she'd tasted in years. She didn't speak until she cleaned the bowl. Wyatt watched her with an expression she didn't understand, something like relief. When she finished, he took the bowl without a word and washed it. Then he returned to her side. "You should see your room." Cece rose, nerves fluttering in her chest. Wyatt led her up a broad staircase to the second floor. He opened a door. The room beyond stole her breath. A wide bed with quilts thick enough to drown winter itself. A window overlooking the snow-blanketed trees. A braided rug, a pinewood dresser, a rocking chair angled toward the firelight that flickered through the hall. This can't be for me." "It is," Wyatt said simply. "It's too much." "No." He shook his head. "You've had too little for too long." He stepped inside and lit a lamp, warming the corners of the room. "If something's missing, tell me," he said. "Anything you need, I'll get it." Cece gripped the edge of the dresser. "Wyatt, why are you doing all this? For me?" He paused. His shadow stretched long across the floor. "Because you deserve a place where no one sneers at you. A place where you're not starving, freezing, or apologizing for existing." His voice lowered. "And because I meant what I said in town." Her heart thudded. "Which part?" "That I don't need anything but you." Heat rushed to her face. She looked away, but he stepped closer, slow and deliberate, not looming, not demanding, just near enough that she felt the warmth radiating from him. "If those words frighten you," he murmured, "I'll pull them back. If they confuse you, I'll explain. If they hurt you, I'll swallow them and never speak them again." She turned to him. "They don't hurt." His eyes softened. "Good." Wyatt took one strand of her damp hair, gently brushing it behind her ear. The feather-light touch sent a shiver down her spine. "You'll rest here tonight," he said. "Doors stay unlocked in this house unless you want them locked. You're free here, Cecilia. Free to move. Free to speak. Free to be." A tear slipped down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb. "Don't cry," he whispered. "Not because you're afraid. If you cry in this house, it'll be because you're warm or fed or safe. Not because someone called you names." Cece swallowed hard. "I don't know how to live like that, without fear." "You'll learn," he said. "I'll help you." The words settled into her like warm bread and honey. Wyatt stepped back. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything." Cece nodded. "Good night, Wyatt." He paused at the doorway. "Good night, Cecilia." He left the door slightly ajar, a gesture that said she wasn't alone, but also that she had room to breathe. Cece sat on the bed. The quilts enveloped her like a soft embrace. For the first time in years, she felt her body relax fully, deeply, safe, warm, full. And as she drifted toward sleep, one thought whispered through her mind. Maybe she wasn't meant to live her life in the shadows. Maybe someone, this man, this mountain, truly saw her. Winter deepened over the next week. Snow fell in thick curtains, turning the world outside Wyatt's cabin into a silent white wilderness. Inside, life settled into a rhythm Cece had never known before. Steady, gentle, safe. She woke early and made breakfast. Wyatt chopped wood, hauled water, fixed the latch on a drafty window. They worked side by side, sharing small conversations, small smiles. She laughed for the first time in months. Wyatt heard it once, looked up from the firewood he was stacking, and the look in his eyes, pure, quiet wonder, nearly melted her where she stood. But beneath all the warmth, all the comfort, Cece carried a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. She had not told Wyatt everything, Not about her father, not about the sheriff, not about what or who might come looking for her. And she feared the truth would ruin everything he'd given her. One evening, after supper, Wyatt sat in the rocking chair sharpening an old hunting knife while Cece mended a torn sleeve near the hearth. The flames cast golden light over his features, softening the lines, warming the gray in his eyes. He looked peaceful. She hated to disturb that. "Wyatt," she said quietly. He didn't look up immediately, but paused mid-stroke. "Hmm? There's something I need to tell you." Now he looked up, and Cece nearly lost her nerve. Wyatt had a way of seeing through silence, through people. His gaze wasn't sharp now or demanding. It was simply there, steady as stone, ready to hold whatever she handed him. "Come here," he murmured. She moved closer, sitting on the stool near his knee. He set the knife aside and gave her his full attention. "What is it, Cecilia?" Her fingers twisted in her skirt. "I didn't leave Pinewood because I wanted a new start, or because I got tired of the way people treated me." She swallowed hard. "I left because I was running." Wyatt leaned forward slightly. "From what?" She breathed in, out. "I had a deed, a land deed. My mother's family left it to me before they died. 30 acres along the creek south of Pinewood, rich soil, clean water, worth more than I realized." She blinked fast, tears threatening. "My father found out." Wyatt's jaw clenched at the word father. "He never wanted a daughter," Cece whispered. "Only a servant. He drank, gambled, and when he heard the railroad survey was passing near the creek, he wanted the land." Her throat tightened. "He tried to force me to sign it over." Wyatt's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "He put hands on you?" "Yes." Her voice cracked. "More than once." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "He took the deed," she continued, "but it was useless to him without my signature. He threatened to sell me off to a rancher out west. Said a fat girl like me should be grateful anyone wanted me at all." She wiped a tear. "So I ran. I left before he could sell me or force me to sign." Wyatt's eyes darkened, turning from storm gray to gunmetal. "Does he know where you are?" he asked. "No, but the sheriff does. He helped my father look for me. He wants a cut of the land. If they find me, they'll drag me back, and they'll make me sign." Wyatt rose slowly, too slowly. The air felt charged. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" "Because," Cece whispered, "I didn't want to bring danger into your home. People in Pinewood already hate me. I didn't want to burden you, too." Wyatt stopped in front of her, towering but not oppressive, protective, controlled, a storm held on a leash. "Look at me." She did. "Listen closely," he said, voice low and calm, but carrying an undercurrent of fury not directed at her. "You are not a burden, not your past, not your body, not your fears, not your truth." He knelt before her, taking her hands gently in his. "What was done to you wasn't your fault. It never will be." Tears spilled over. "And if those men come looking for you," he said, "they'll find me instead." Her breath caught. "Wyatt." "I won't let them touch you," he vowed. "I won't let them take a damn thing from you, not your land, not your choices, not your safety." A log cracked in the fire. Cece's fear didn't fully disappear, but something inside her loosened. A knot that had strangled her for years began to unravel. But the night wasn't finished with them. A sudden knock hammered against the cabin door, 3 sharp, heavy blows that rattled the hinges. Cece froze. Wyatt stood in a single fluid motion, his hand already reaching for the rifle leaning near the hearth. "Stay behind me," he murmured. She obeyed. He stepped to the door, shifted the latch, and opened it a few inches. Snow swirled in, and behind it 3 figures stood in the dark. Sheriff Weller, 2 deputies, and behind them a 4th silhouette barely visible in the torchlight, but Cece recognized the shape instantly. Her father. A wave of cold terror crashed through her. "Evening, Blackwood," the sheriff drawled. "Sorry to bother a man at home this late, but we're looking for someone." Wyatt opened the door another inch, enough to show the rifle in his hands. "You're standing on my land," he said flatly. "Say what you came to say." Sheriff Weller smirked. "We believe Cecilia Ashford is hiding up here. Her daddy says she stole a legal document. We're here to fetch her." Cece felt the blood drain from her face. Wyatt didn't move, didn't blink. His voice came out low and calm as winter steel. "She isn't hiding." The sheriff raised a brow. "So she is here." Wyatt stepped forward, blocking their line of sight with his body. "She is in my home," he said, "under my protection." His grip tightened on the rifle. "And she isn't going anywhere," her father snarled. "You got no right to keep her, Blackwood. She belongs to me." Wyatt's voice thundered. "She belongs to no one." Silence fell, heavy, dangerous. The sheriff shifted, suddenly uneasy. "Now, Blackwood, there ain't no need for trouble." "You brought trouble to my door," Wyatt replied, "and you won't cross this threshold tonight. Not for her, not for anything." Then, more quietly, "You leave now, or you'll regret the alternative." The sheriff hesitated. Snow blew sideways between them. Tension burned like a fuse. Finally, Weller spat into the snow. "This ain't over." Wyatt closed the door in their faces. He dropped the bar across the lock, set the rifle down gently, then turned to Cece. And the moment he saw her shaking, he opened his arms. She fell into him. His voice was barely a whisper above her hair. "They'll have to kill me before they take you." She clung to him, trembling, and for the first time in her life, she knew someone meant those words. The sheriff's retreat bought them only a few hours of uneasy peace. Wyatt knew it. Cece sensed it. The cabin itself seemed to hold its breath. Wyatt stayed awake long after Cece lay in bed, his boots planted on the floorboards, rifle across his knees. The fire cast orange shadows along the wall. He didn't move except to add wood to the flames. He didn't blink unless he had to. Before dawn, Cece crept down the stairs. "Wyatt," she whispered. He looked up, eyes sharp despite the long night. "You should be resting. I can't sleep while you're down here alone." He set the rifle aside and stood. "I'm not alone." She stepped closer. Her voice trembled. "They'll come back, won't they?" "Yes." Not a threat, not a guess, a certainty. Cece's breath hitched. "I'm sorry. I didn't want this trouble for you." Wyatt cupped her cheek, his hand warm and steady. "Cecilia, look at me." She lifted her gaze. "This is not your fault. You understand?" Her lips parted. "But you didn't choose a cruel father. You didn't choose a crooked sheriff. You didn't choose to be hunted for land that's rightfully yours." He brushed away the tear on her cheek. "What you did choose was to survive, and I'll stand with any woman who chooses survival." Her eyes blurred again. "I don't want you hurt." He touched his forehead to hers. "Nothing out there scares me half as much as the thought of you being alone again." Something inside her broke open at that. Before she could speak, the sound came, a branch snapping outside, a muffled voice, another, boots crunching snow. Wyatt's head lifted. His eyes went cold. "They're here." He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rifle, moved Cece behind the heavy oak table, and blew out the lamp near the window. Only the firelight remained. The first fist pounded the door, hard, demanding. "Blackwood!" It was Sheriff Weller. "Open up. We're taking the girl. Her pa says she's coming with us, and you've got no legal right to keep her." Wyatt strode to the door. "You're trespassing," he called back, "and I gave you one chance last night. You won't get another." Cece's heartbeat thundered. Her father's voice followed, slurred, ugly. "Cecilia, get out here. You think you're some fine lady now? You're coming home and signing what I tell you to sign." Cece flinched. Wyatt didn't. He threw open the door, only a crack, but enough. The cold slammed into the cabin like a wave. Sheriff Weller stood on the porch with 2 deputies. Her father lurked behind them, eyes mean, breath fogging in the air. Wyatt held the door with one hand, rifle in the other, barrel visibly loaded. "Last warning," he said. The sheriff lifted a gloved hand. "We ain't leaving without her." "Then you're not leaving at all." A dangerous beat of silence passed. "You threatening an officer?" Weller sneered. Wyatt stepped fully into the doorway. The storm gray of his eyes was pure iron. "I'm promising you," he said, "that if any of you takes one step inside this home, I'll put you in the snow where the wolves can decide whether you live to crawl back." Even the deputies stiffened. "This ain't your fight." Weller tried again. "She's a runaway. The law—" "The law?" Wyatt laughed once, a sound without humor. "You think I don't know the law? You think I don't know you're helping him steal her land for railroad money?" Weller's eyes narrowed. Wyatt raised the rifle slightly. The message was clear. One step. Just one. Her father snarled, spittle freezing on his beard. "She's mine. She owes me. She'll sign whatever I tell her." Wyatt placed himself directly between Cece and the men outside. His voice dropped to something low, lethal, final. "She is not property. She is not chattel. She is not yours." He paused. "And she is not going anywhere." A gust of wind slammed the shutters. Snow spiraled sideways. The moment hung like a drawn bowstring. Then Weller lifted his hands. "Fine," the sheriff muttered. "Have it your way. But you're making a mistake, Blackwood. A big one." They backed away. Her father lingered a fraction too long, stare crawling across the doorway like a curse. Wyatt shut the door, bolted it, secured the bar, then turned to Cece. She was shaking. He set the rifle aside, crossed the floor, and gathered her into his arms. She clung to him, her face buried against his chest, sobs silent but deep. "They'll be back," she whispered. "Let them come," Wyatt said. "I'll be here." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why risk yourself for me?" Wyatt lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Because loving something once and losing it does not mean I stop loving," he said. "And because you, Cecilia Ashford, are worth fighting for." Her breath faltered. "Wyatt." He touched her cheek. Slow, deliberate, tender. "You're safe here," he whispered. "As long as you want to be." The storm sat heavy over the mountains for the next 2 days, smothering the world in white silence. No horses, no boots, no voices approached the cabin. The sheriff and her father had vanished into the blizzard like ghosts who'd banged on the wrong door. Inside, life slowed. Wyatt repaired a hinge on the loft door. Cece baked bread that filled the cabin with warmth and scent. He chopped firewood. She mended his shirts. When their hands brushed over the table, a spark jumped between them. Small, shy, impossible to ignore. But it wasn't the chores or the meals that changed something between them. It was the quiet. Quiet enough for Cece to breathe without fear. Quiet enough for Wyatt to hear laughter in the walls again. Quiet enough for both of them to realize that danger wasn't the only thing growing between them. One evening, after supper, Wyatt stepped out onto the porch. The storm had eased, leaving a sky full of stars that glowed like ice-dusted lanterns. Cece followed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You should stay inside," he said softly. "It's cold." "I wanted to see the snow," she replied, "and I didn't want you standing out here alone." He glanced at her, really looked, and something warm flickered in his gaze. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals. The cabin windows glowed behind them like a promise. Wyatt leaned against the railing, arms folded. "They'll come back eventually," he said. "Men like that don't let go easy." Cece's fingers tightened on her shawl. "What will we do when they do?" "We." The word echoed through him. He stepped closer, not touching, just enough that his voice brushed her skin like a hand. "When they come back," Wyatt murmured, "I'll stand in front of you again, as many times as it takes." Cece swallowed. "Wyatt, I'm just one woman. I'm not worth—" He turned to her, eyes intense beneath the winter light. "You are worth every fight," he said. "You are worth every breath." Her heart stuttered. Wyatt looked away then, toward the tree line where the dark pressed close. "I built this place to keep the world out," he said quietly. "Now I find myself wanting to build something inside it instead." She stepped a little closer. "With me?" "If you'll have it," he whispered. The words floated between them like fragile glass. Cece's breath fogged in the air. Her hands trembled. She had never been asked what she wanted, not by any man, not even by life itself. And now, here he was, a giant carved from loss and winter, offering her something she'd never dared imagine. A home, a future, a place where she mattered. "I don't know what I deserve," she said softly. Wyatt looked at her then, truly looked, and his voice dropped to something raw. "You deserve safety. You deserve warmth. You deserve someone who sees you, someone who chooses you every day." He took a step closer. "You deserve to decide where you belong." Cece's breath hitched as their distance closed to inches. The cabin behind them glowed like a heart. The forest breathed around them, dark and endless. The world held still, waiting. Wyatt spoke one more time, barely above a whisper. "This cabin, this life, it's your home now." A pause. "If you'll have it." A tear slipped down her cheek, caught by the cold before it could fall. The stars above them flickered like held breath. Would she choose this place, this man, this life that terrified her with its tenderness? The question hung in the winter air unanswered. For now, stories like this remind us why people still look toward the mountains, the snow, and the far-off cabins where two hearts might find each other in the quiet. Because love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a warm room on a freezing night. Sometimes it's someone standing between you and the world and saying, "You're safe here." Sometimes it's choosing the person everyone else overlooked. If you've listened this far, tell me, where in the world are you right now? And if you still believe that love can rise even from hardship and winter storms, stay close. The next story is already waiting for you.